Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to our final session of CitSci India 2023. I hope that you've been having as much fun as I have listening to all the amazing speakers and the wonderful posters that we've been having. And I've really enjoyed all of your questions and the discussions. And I've been having as much fun learning from you as I'm sure you have been from learning from each other. And that is the whole purpose of this session. So one of the things that we've most enjoyed at CitSci for the past 4 years that we've been doing it is the chance to learn from each other, the chance to share stories, the chance to share strategies, information, not from a standpoint of being experts, because we're all on this journey together. We're all equally learning. We're all equally struggling with all of the same issues. And it's just a chance to talk to each other. So that's the purpose of this practitioners clinic. This is not an expert panel. It's not that, both of these wonderful people, although they are experts in their own right, know everything. They're going through the same sort of challenges that many of you are. And this is just a chance to kind of have a conversation with them and with you about the experiences that they've been having, the learnings they've had, the struggles they've had, to really increase the community spirit and increase the sharing of knowledge that we so desperately need to build our community here in India. So we're so proud to have both of these wonderful, wonderful people here with us today. They've been active in our program throughout the sessions, and we really appreciate both of them being here. I'd first like to start by introducing Bhavya George. She is a climate change program coordinator at Keystone Foundation, and she's actually the in charge for strategizing the vision for climate change at Keystone. And she works with historians, also climate historians, various educators, and also with journalists in the Nilgiris and Central and Eastern India to build action research and climate impact. So Bhavya, we are so happy that you've been accepting our invite to join us at this clinic today.
Thanks, Shanna.
Absolutely. And we also have P.Jeganathan here. Jagan is a wildlife biologist, and he works with the Nature Conservation Foundation just across from NCBS, where I've been working. And he carries out a very long-term research on birds, on threatened birds in particular. And he also writes extensively in Tamil on nature, conservation, and natural history. And he's been working towards popularizing the importance of nature writing in local languages through various workshops. And he's involved in coordinating citizen science projects on birds in Tamil Nadu. So Jagan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start this session by having both of you just also tell us a little bit more about yourselves and your journeys before we open up the questions. So Bhavya, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello all. It's been a wonderful moment being here and sharing my experiences on the citizen science work that I've been part of in Keystone Foundation. So I have a master's in environment management, more so on the forestry side. And after that, I've been working in Keystone Foundation for 5 years, mainly with the communities, the tribal communities in the protected areas. So that has been my niche in geography, which I've selected to work on. So in there, as Shannon described, kind of I started working with the women barefoot ecologists to kind of understand the changes in agroecology, which indeed had a lot of a bit of the data collection, both qualitative and quantitative, and to understand how they perceive changes and how it has impacted their life, lifestyle, food systems, etc., in their context. And later on, with the climate change program being more active in Keystone Foundation, the climate historians is one of the work which kind of adds into the citizen science element, where we're understanding as historians what do people, local people have seen changes in the Nilgiris, and how do they perceive the climate in itself. I mean, the change in climate in itself. So that has been my journey, and mainly the challenge comes in with the usage of the words, because for us the technical words has been more easier, but how do you communicate those same words without changing its meaning, but then also including their kind of perception and their narratives into it. So that has been a bit of challenge in kind of documenting stuffs, but it has been fun, and I think in my journey I've learned more from them than the university's education I have attended. So that's the citizen space I take up, and I would be wanting to listen more from your end, the questions, and then I could like talk more. Yeah, thanks, Shannon, and over to
I
you.
uh, I completely resonate with what you're saying. I also feel that when I am involved more with communities and listening to them, it is so much more educational to me than anything I took at a university. I completely agree with that. Jagan, how about you?
Hi, thanks for having us here. And I think you mentioned most of the things like I work on birds and I like watching birds, I'm more of a bird watcher. I use eBird and iNat very frequently, kind of go eccentric way of doing things in both watching birds and eBirding and iNatting and stuff. So I work on birds. Many people think that those birds doesn't exist, but I'm a very hopeful monster, if you want to call. So I continue to pursue searching them and working on them. Yeah, and I like writing in Tamil. So I encourage others to write in Tamil, and I do kind of conduct workshops and to in nature about nature. And citizen science is mainly after I get into the e-bird and bird watching. So kind of becoming a practitioner um, along with many others. I kind of coordinate the Pongal bird count in Tamil Nadu. Kind of very akin to what we have in Kerala, Onam bird count and things like that. So that's been about 8, 9 years since we have been. It's a yearly thing. Many bird watchers contribute, and we kind of gather people all across Tamil Nadu and bird watchers and encourage them to do bird watching and things like that. Yeah, so quite excited to see all this CitSci India 2023. Very nice talks and amazing. Learned quite a bit. Today's talk as well, a keynote talk and a few posters. Very interesting. Yeah, thanks for having us here.
So this is just going to be a conversation, and I'll read the questions on behalf of the participants who've submitted different questions. And in general, right? So Bhavya, for you, we've asked for questions about gender barriers, engaging with tribal communities and citizen science, and for you, Jagan, about socioeconomic barriers and communication barriers for non-English speakers. Since both of you have quite a bit of experience on those particular topics. The first question, though, I'm going to ask is actually for both of you. Okay, so I thought I'd start with that. It's coming from Praveen. And Praveen wants to know about the hidden barriers in citizen science that you think exist in India today. Some of them we're just mentioning, gender barriers are obvious, linguistic barriers, of course, as well. But there are also maybe other sorts of barriers in equity, diversity, or inclusion that are difficult to perceive on the surface and therefore difficult to gauge the impact. So I was wondering if both of you might comment a little bit about some of these barriers that either you've experienced or you've seen happening in other projects that you've been aware of.
Janan, you want to go first, and then I'll.
That's for both of you, so either of you can go.
You can go ahead. Yeah, thanks.
So I think in my experience, I haven't. I mean, like I use a lot of apps, but in the work I proceeded, we didn't use any particular app per se to collect the data on the agroecological stuffs. But a hidden barrier which I could like notice and experience was the digital space, right? Because it's not for. I mean, like though we say we have been digitized, but still I feel there is a lot of gap in it. Even though you might have the device, but then the network is an issue. We do have like a lot of off network working apps, but many a times to engage with the digital space has been kind of like a challenge. Even the simple thing. So I mean, like we use usually the smartphones. I mean, like to connect through WhatsApp or like which has been very easy in the communities I work with, and they have like taken it in a more energetic way than the other apps. So one is the digital space, and then again when it comes to the digital space, even though we kind of like train them, and they kind of like some people like grasp it very easily. But then the other issue comes up again, the language, where I think Jagan can touch on more, because Tamil, even for us, even though we work in Tamil Nadu, Tamil is also not the language they are all comfortable with, because they all have their own language spaces, especially in the communities. So then how do we kind of like bring, the knowledge base that they have about their surroundings, and if I want to contribute that to the citizen space world that has been already kind of like dominated with iNaturalist and eBird, how do we kind of like take their knowledge into it, is a question I myself have, and it's also like hidden barrier is the same thing. So otherwise I've not seen much. These are the main challenges I have faced, like how to like make it, and also like very everything is very right, I mean like written based things. So how do we like kind of like give value to something which is more oral, so which they are more comfortable with? So how do we like get in that? So that's one barrier which I have experienced, and we're also like kind of like working on it. So otherwise not much, and I would want to know what Jagan has to say here.
Yeah, please, Jagan, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going through Praveen's question right now. Like he said, some of them are obvious, like gender, regional barriers, and linguistic and things like that, like Bhavya has mentioned. The one thing hidden would be for Indian context, which is a very kind of sensitive, which many people doesn't want to even touch. Possibly, unknowingly, the practitioners might exclude the people who are underprivileged and economically as well as socially. So that's probably, kind of hidden. It's not that the practitioner doesn't want to include that component into it, but probably when people, as a practitioner, when they start a project, they might think more about the design, how to collect information, how to do outreach about it and stuff like that. But at the same time, they may or may not think about how can we include all the sect of people, all the components, all the you know what I mean, socially
Yeah,
as well as
absolutely.
economically challenged people. So that's probably would be the hidden, which you may not do it consciously, but it probably one of the thing which as a practitioner we all need to think about it even before starting the project.
I mean, if you haven't grown up, right, with the people that you're working with, right? So you know not only the local language, but also the local expressions, the local ways of, especially for the kind of work that we're all doing with biodiversity. It even if you know the language, it can be very, very hard to discuss because they haven't had the same training that you have, and you haven't had their training, their natural training, their historical and cultural training. So it's not just a language barrier. I think that's the biggest, for me, that's been my personal experience as well. It's actually like this cultural barrier of just not being able to converse in the way that they describe their world, and they have deep knowledge, but sometimes it's hard to tap into that. And that particularly comes when they don't have particularly the traditional education that we've had, right? So yeah, so they haven't learned the terminology. So
I think there was a paper, I can't remember the exact citation, in US. Most of the checklist of in eBird or something, not the checklists are not coming from the region where people of color lives. So that's shows that. So I don't know if that can be done in India. We could do a rural versus urban divide, but it's very difficult to map that in our context. But as a practitioner, even before starting something, if we want to be inclusive, we have to be inclusive, then we have to tick all the boxes. Okay, I'm reaching out, gender, tick, economically, background people or a region, tick. So how am I going to address that? What steps I'm going to take? And I can't do it 100%, but at least I've taken some steps. And I tell about it. I talk about it. And I have done that. Okay, do this. So in one of the projects, some of my friends are doing, just helping them. So we kind of did we cannot ask people directly, these questions. So we kind of perceived from their professions that they could fall under certain category, which we may or may not be correct, but we could figure out, and then we try to fill that up. So that kind of effort has to be done from the background. You don't have to tell this to everyone because it's a bit of a sensitive thing. If the group of people are okay, then you could. But it's a sensitive thing. You know what I mean? So I think as a practitioner, we have to think about these things before even starting the project. Not just worry about the data quality and things like that, but also about these kind of things. Yeah.
Shannon, if I just
Go ahead, please,
add
Bhavya.
to it in a brief way. So I think adding to what Jegan is saying, to be more inclusive, the purpose and one is the purpose of the whole project, right, that we are doing of the citizen science. Sometimes it might act as a barrier, because if the purpose doesn't kind of like stimulate the people whom we are like connected with, and we want their knowledge and a resource to be added in the citizen science space, it doesn't help, because they themselves have their priorities might be different, their issues might be different, and what I chose to do might not resonate with what they want to contribute with. So that's one of the hidden barrier, like I have like seen and sometimes also come across, so that we do like change some of the questions of the whole project as well, so that it makes them more comfortable and kind of like add in their resource and knowledge into it. So that's one barrier that I have like also like seen and felt.
Yeah, so that's kind of a question, just to follow up, that Mendel just put on the chat in response, and it's an interesting question about what are some of these challenges about time allowance. You mentioned that, Bhavya, right? And also the fact that especially the people that we're talking about, those communities, I mean, they're busy. They're doing a lot of things in their days, right? They have to take care of their families in many cases, and do jobs that have long hours, and they don't have a lot of time to go around looking at birds or leaves or whatever we want them to look at, right? And so he was wanting to know if this is one of the limitations, that this time allowance, or if it's also in terms of the education, like I had mentioned earlier. Do you find this to be also a struggle in getting communities to participate in, especially the type of underserved and underprivileged communities that we're talking about right now? This is for both of you, actually, because you're both having these same experiences. So
Jagan, you want to go with that, and I can add it?
Yeah, I guess it's a bit of everything. Yeah. It's very difficult to pinpoint. It's a mix of everything. So that's a short answer. Yeah.
For me, of course, yes, and that's where, like, for me also, gender became a more priority subject with respect to time allowance, because even there is a lot of like difference, because many a times the large meetings that we hold to understand how they see things, it's mainly attended by men, again, because women have a lot of things to take up, especially when the community has wage labor work to do with. So I mean like that, this time allowance is kind of like a barrier and a challenge, but somewhere like I think finding something that interests them has helped to kind of like navigate. like we did phenology along with season watch in our areas, like Satyamangalam and Mudumalai Tiger Reserve, with a small data set. It was not large. But then the question that we kind of like asked is also like what trees they want to like observe, does it hold near to them? Has they seen changes in in the recent past, and then which one they want to like do it. So then some answers came up. They chose like amla, jamun, the wild mango, and then they started like kind of like seeing it. But that was very systematic. It was like time was needed only once in a week, so they would just go along. And there were a pair of women, so they would get to like just be together, spend an hour together. They're kind of like contributing to the citizen science, but then they also had the fun of being together and observing a tree, and writing down some of the narratives, like the interactions that they're seeing around the tree. It might be social, it might be cultural, and the ecological stuff. So that I think helped us to kind of like break the barrier. I would not say 100%, but still at least it helped to kind of like create that ground, to pursue that interest in contributing to the larger data set of the citizen science. Yeah, that has been my experience.
I just want to emphasize, I think that's such an important point you made, Bhavya, about working with the community on their own terms. What are the people that you want to engage in citizen science? What do they want? What are their interests? What are their needs? So that your project, it's much more likely that they'll take it up because it's something that they too have a passion for and an interest in. I think this is an extremely important point, and it is missed out by many of us when we engage in citizen science because we want to work with fish or frogs. So we just go somewhere and like, you need to count frogs, and maybe they don't even care about frogs. They care about something else. So it is very, very important to listen to your communities first. I think this is a really, really valuable point you put in. You mentioned gender as well, and that's a question that Anuja has put up in the chat. She wants to know if you think gender has affected your research work that you've been doing, and maybe if you can give a couple of examples of how it has affected.
Because her question was like how my gender has affected.
Yeah.
So I think on that note, I would say it has affected me in a way positively to engage with women to women more easily. I mean, in my experience, it has been that though I started my work, we were like a set of barefoot ecologists that we started in Satyamangalam Tiger Reserve. So like sit with 12 men around, I'm not saying it kind of like was a barrier to me to engage with them. It was easy, but still for me, again, as you mentioned, Shannon, we're not grown up with them. I don't know their culture. It was my start in here and in Keystone Foundation, and thanks to my mentors who kind of like helped me to navigate those challenges also, and the field assistant. I mean, not field. I mean, like my field coordinator, my best colleague who was there, and so that kind of like helped me to kind of like go bit step by step and work with them. But my comfort space came in also when the women entered in to do the same work that we were doing. um but as a gender, I mean, like my gender helped there because I was a woman, and they could like connect to me not just on the work but on a lot of other questions we used to like have. It might be even their menstrual health sometimes we will discuss, so that is not at all part of the work that we are doing in, but it comes as a very natural discussions many times, their health issues, their communities health issues, and then also like a lot of other social challenges. It could be even now when I'm working with climate educators here. It's a women climate educators we have who are working in the schools, public schools, to kind of like disseminate knowledge on the climate science. So they're even that's the same kind of like a rapport that I could like notice. It's more easy to like kind of like just sit with them, understand what they are going through, and then bring in that element. So on that note, I have to tell to Anuja that it has helped me positively to engage with the space with women. But with men, when I say more than community, it comes up, to the other stakeholders. So with the community men, it has been again like an easy, though I have to like be bit more assertive than working with the women group. But it was never like, the challenge, or like we always had that camaraderie to continue with. But with the other stakeholders, sometimes it's a bit challenge. So sometimes, when you like go with some proposals, you have to like pitch that to the government officials. So there I feel they take kind of like a ease that looking at me and feeling like, okay, something she has come up with. And so that's something like I have noticed. So otherwise with the communities, it was like for me easy, being a woman working with both, I mean, like sex, I should like say that. Yeah.
Yeah. I can echo that as a woman as well. I've had the exact same experiences. So and Jagan, I'm gonna go back to you actually with a question from Parag that's sort of related, besides gender barriers, what can you maybe give some strategies that you find have proven effective for working with non-English speaking communities and encouraging their participation? And have you found technology useful in doing that?
Yeah. So what helps is to create a minute details of what you want in the local language, and publicize it as widely as possible. For example, even if it is how to use the app, and you have to make each and every, just an example is that if a person do not know how to use the eBird app, and I just have to take a screenshot and write, okay, click here. If you see this, do that. So that kind of do and don'ts. And that has to be not just, in the static form, but also if we could create that in a video form, the explainers, that really helps. And give a voiceover in the local language on how to do that. And also, it's important to engage with them. If somebody reach out to you, then it's our responsibility to tell them, take time, take a pain of explaining them till they understand what has to be done. So that's more important than equally important, producing the material. So it could be like put it out in the websites and send it to Instagram or whatever social media.
Right.
And then and again, you have only people who can have those kind of facilities. So yeah, so the other thing example I can think of is there is a very knowledgeable forest guide, god, somewhere in Andhra, and he reaches out telling that, okay, I have done this, I have seen this many birds and this many animals today, and you should have the capacity and time to include his information as a proxy. Somebody has to volunteer to do that. So that kind of thing helps. So there is no one proven strategy that this will help, but it's a mix of everything, and it's all come back to the practitioner. It's their responsibility to do everything for them. Yeah.
And I think that relates to Saya's question as well, who's working with Season Watch, because saying that the communication is in English, but they translate resources and posters. And you're saying basically that's not enough. You still have to go beyond if you really want to communicate it. It's not just the written word, it has to be also spoken, which means you have to work with people who speak the language. Yeah, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yeah.
Okay. Bhavya, I'll go back to you. So you've been talking about your work with tribal communities, and Farda, who's one of the co-organizers, actually wanted to know a little bit more about that, about how the community members are actually, how do they contribute their findings to the platform, and how does that documentation happen? Could you explain that a little bit?
Mm-hmm. Um, the first work which I was like talking about with the women in Satyamangalam and Mudumalai, it was mostly to document the changes that they have seen in their agroecological space. So that included a bit about knowing what wildlife is entering their field, like the farm field, and then if the wildlife has entered, and was there any damage to the crop, or was it just like a visit kind of a thing? Because most of the times everything is seen as a conflict, but it might not be. So we wanted to like check on that. And it also like had a kind of like a seasonal calendar that they're seeing in the farm, what they do on the farm, their own activities from the human perspective, and then from the ecological angle, the phenophases of the crops, whatever they are growing in, and it had a bit of element on the phenology documentation of the trees that they chose to do. So there, the way we documented was mainly paperwork. And also the work started in during the COVID time. We just like pitched the work, the trainings, everything in the end of 19. And we know like 2020 was a year of pandemic. And somewhere like for us, it was a paperwork mostly that we kind of like took the tool as we had like a data sheets, so they were supposed to like fill in that in their own. I mean, like usually we have like this pair of women in which at least one would be like okay to write in, and the other would be more a bit elderly, and who has like more understanding of the traditional spaces and all that thing. So it's a combo that works in for us. The challenge I felt there, I mean, like the paperwork actually helped them to like take in and go, because we asked them whether they'll be like comfortable with the tabs, and many of them weren't. They used like the tabs, phones, and the cameras to only like document pictures. We got like some very nice pictures also from them, which kind of like talks some more about the changes. So it became kind of like a collection of photo stories. But with the paper, because it needed a lot of follow-ups, and we couldn't have this meetings to synergize two areas work to understand what they are seeing and perceiving, and how they kind of like it's different from another region. I think that kind of like didn't happen in the work that I mean, like we started in 2019 end. But otherwise, paper is a tool that we used in, and with the climate educators now, again, we're digitizing it a bit. We have like a weather data that comes in through another application that we have like externally using. But again, they're also like we kind of like taking again the paperwork. I think one, because they're comfortable with it. It's also like a comfort zone, which we're also like trying hard to see how to like just navigate step by step away from it and make it more digitized, so that the data collation becomes easy. So in the first part, the analysis and other things, few of the biophytic ecologists who have undergone formal education spaces, they kind of like typed it into the system in a Excel, and then we saw what are the changes in there. So that was a step that we have followed. But otherwise, yeah, it's mainly the paperwork, and the information dissemination also happens in a very easy format, like the calendars and the charts, which they can like draw upon, and also like using a lot of pictures, so take back to the community. So that's few of the steps that we have like used.
I think you've touched upon this already, but it relates, what you've been saying, it also relates to Geeta's question, because she was actually wondering about the access to technology between women and men, and you've basically remarked on that. Have you had any success with getting women in your using smartphones, laptops, or I mean, because it sounds like you've been primarily using paper. I mean, how have you leveraged technology, or are you training? I mean, how are you working with that? Because paper is really hard to deal with.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's really difficult. But I do understand. I mean, that's what Geeta's point was. She's interested in this. That there is a stronger barrier for technology with women in general. So yeah. So please.
One, it's the absence of device, and that's I mean, like in a family of four, if they have like two kids and a husband and wife, usually they all share the smartphones. And again, I mean, like kind of like hovering around the COVID times, because it made life complicated even for them, because even for the kids education, they needed a smartphone there. So somehow, like I think during that period, smartphone usage became a bit high. amongst both the groups, but still women in most of the spaces, like recently we were having a meeting in BRT, in the Pununjanur, which is a border of Satyamangalam and Karnataka, BRT, Vilagiri Rangaswamy Temple, Tiger Reserve. So amongst the women, like we had like 20 women in that group, only 2 to 3 had, the smartphone in their hand. So the issue is also like very different, right? So then it becomes like, one, the absence of device. Second, even though if they have the device, again, the training part becomes very important to how to go beyond just answering calls, and like, the basic communication stuff that we use phone for. So here, how to like go one step beyond it. So WhatsApp has been like an easy, space everybody is comfortable with. We do have some people who use Insta in our group, Instagram, Facebook. They have like few of them, but otherwise, when it comes to the app, I know like 1 to 2 barefoot ecologists. Again, age comes in there, Shannon. So which I also like saw in one of the question. So they are the younger ones who are like more comfortable with this, Instagram, making reels, putting out, and also like when it comes to the app like eBird and even iNaturalist, few people use Google Lens. I've seen like 1 to 2 people whom I work with, kind of like use. But training, as Jagan was also like mentioning, it's not just training. You just say that there is an app, but a lot of like follow-up trainings are necessary, and making it much more in their language through like flow charts and all that, which we have also like taken from our end. Like a digital training was given to the climate storytellers, where uh, people from different, I mean, like spaces came in and trained them to use the phones, even to take a photograph, how to take it, all those things. And yeah, so that's something. But to add in, not my work, but my colleagues' work who worked in Nilambur, we also like tried using, we tried like developing an app by the community itself. But again, there the age was the factor. The younger ones took it more easy, and they kind of like, it's also the tech savviness comes in, right? For few it's more easy, for few it is like that fear, always, and they're like, oh, if I do this, something might happen. So that I have like noticed a lot. So the age is one, and then the formal education space, mainly who have been in the formal education space, for them to change to this technology has been easier. But training is a must, and then engaging them in this and letting them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think we lost Bhavya for a second. So Jagan, I'll go back to you. It's actually a similar question that Sankar has had as Sankar, and who wants to know if how language actually inhibits the adoption of technology. So we were just talking about gender, but have you seen any effect in the use of apps with non-English speakers, and how do you deal with that in your context?
Yeah, I think the forest department has got something similar, app in the local language. I've seen people, the forest watchers, using it. They do it for the regular monitoring, patrol, and things like that. So that will be in Tamil. There are possibility, but it's very difficult for a practitioner if you don't have a app to collect information, and if you are relying on other platforms like Season Watch or eBird or iNat or whatever, you cannot develop an app in your language. So that involves a bit of cost, isn't it? So it's very difficult. But if it is small scale,
technical training, I mean,
yeah, exactly, yeah. But if it is small and if you have a capacity to do that, then it's probably worth doing it. It depends again on the work which you are involving in. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of related to that point, Prabhakar, who's also a co-organizer, mentioned that he knows that you've been working with the vernacular names of species. So do you think there's more participation in the platforms and the efforts when you've been using the vernacular? And do you also think we should have completely local and vernacular platforms in order for it to spread across India? Like, should we go all the way away from scientific names?
Yeah. So I think these are two different questions he has asked, isn't it? One is about the name, and the other thing is about the platform and things like that. So
Correct.
the name is a bit tricky, and it's very difficult, as in, how to put it. It's easy to create a name, yeah, but I personally very much like to have a linguistically responsible names, rather than just for the sake of creating a name, just for your project.
Yeah.
With the Google Translator, Google, you can create names in an instant. But does it make sense? May not. So there again, you're kind of undermining various other linguistic diversity of that language. Like one species will have different names in various parts of India. And if you're choosing only one or two, you are leaving out the other things, and you're not talking their language, even though it is in one language. The words are different. You know what I mean? Maybe in Hindi for crow, just an example, it may be different in Madhya Pradesh. It may be different in other part of the Madhya Pradesh. So you're not reaching them out. So how are you going to address that? So if you address that reasonably well, then you could do that. You have to accommodate that. That's my take on that. No, I don't care about linguistic diversity. I just want information. This is what the majority of the people use. So I'm going to use it. Please go ahead, do it. Take data, but I'm not for it. So we have to remember all that things. Is it ethically done? Linguistically responsible. So you can change it. Give plant names, 100 names, 100 species, 100 names. This is what the name is. So you just use it. But will you feel happy about it? I will not be. So it's very tricky part in Indian context. So that's something which we all need to remember. I don't know. How do you solve it? I don't know. You have to sit with people, make sure that, okay, these are the names we are going to give for this species. You all agree, don't agree. And again, are you doing it democratically or not? Even that is also, a bit tricky. And kind of, okay, 90% of the region uses this name, so we are going to have a synonym, or just another space, giving another space for a slash, give this name as well if you are from this region, or give a regional wise names, platforms. If you are from this region, use this name, whatever. So it's very tricky. You can do it, but if you can address all these things, please go ahead. I would be very hesitant to do it. So that's one thing. The other, I'm just reading his question. Do you think we should have completely local and vernacular platform? Yes, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. In fact, I wish someday this conference happens in regional language. Something only in Hindi, something only in Kannada. Or Bhavya will have a hard time because they have 3 languages, Malayalam and so we have to do that. We have to reach. That should be our goal at some point. Then why do you call this as a citizen science? Yeah. So I think I will be very excited if that happens. I'll be very happy to see that happens. Yeah, we should have a website only in Tamil or only in Hindi for this.
Yeah.
Are we ready to do it? Yeah.
I think that's a very good point. And just to, that is something that we've been very, very conscious of. And we've tried to initiate in various ways during this conference is how to do this in multiple languages. It's a cost barrier. It's actually pretty expensive to do things. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows we kind of do this kind of out of the goodness of our heart, and right in here, we don't have large budgets to do this. And still sponsorship is tricky, as I'm sure everybody listening knows, for citizen science. So being able to put things out in multiple languages and things, it's expensive. So I just want to bring up, like, cost is a massive barrier, continues to be for citizen science. And I know it's not an excuse, but it is the explanation why we're not doing this more in multiple languages, because we have people from all over the country, in fact, in all over the world, that attend this conference. And ideally, we should be able to present this information in whatever language that they are most comfortable with. That would be true citizen science, and we are very aware of this limitation. I also want to follow up personally on something you said. I work with insects, and so I have an interesting problem in that with insects, often the local terminology actually envelops way more species than I'm interested in, right? Because I have kind of the opposite problem, where you mentioned that the same species may be called different things in different parts of the country. I have, like, all bees are all called the same word, right? But I'm actually only interested in a certain species of bee, because that's what I do. So I also have trouble with using local terminology, because sometimes it can be talking about, in my case, different genuses, different, like, completely different things, right? They're not even related. Sometimes they're not even the same type of insect, right? One is an ant and one is a termite or something like this, right? So it can be very, very tricky to use local languages, local terminologies, because because we scientists have our own ways of identifying species that that are often, in my case, microscopic. You have to use a microscope to identify them. I mean, people aren't going to have a microscope laying around for this purpose, right? So it's a very difficult question I think you had to answer there. Bhavya, I'm glad that you're back. I wanted to make sure that I asked you this question from Kunal. I don't know if you had a chance to read it. He tells this really beautiful story about working with fish. He's very passionate about fishes. Kunal is he works with us at the Echo Network. And he talks about, working with fishermen and looking at fishes in the area. And he mostly he mostly ends up interacting with women, right? And he tells the story of, one woman was so fast to help him, and she showed these two very similar looking fish, but she was able to point out to him how they were different, that he wasn't necessarily even aware of. And he really appreciated her skill and wanted to try to engage her more, and also particularly give her attribution for providing the knowledge. And I think that he's really looking for advice from you on how he can do this in a better way. Like, how can he acknowledge the knowledge that these women are providing in a respectful manner, because he's learning from them, basically. So
I mean, like, when it comes for acknowledgement, it's entirely a different issue also it comes in, right? Because it's intellectual property and all that. I mean, like, I'm seeing at the complex level. So otherwise, I mean, like, usually for us, what has worked is we have this publications, not as a research paper per se, but like a collation of stories. And it can, I mean, like, we did one for the Greens. It's long back, which was done before I joined Keystone. But I feel that's a good method here to take in. I mean, like, the credit would be there, the story is from there. So somewhere, like, we do those publications and then give it to the community back, because it's their stories where they are talking about it. So that's one way I feel, Kunal, that you can, like, engage them, where the knowledge. I mean, like, now we have illustrations also. I mean, like, when we did it, we just used the photographs of the wild foods and the narrations that the women have contributed to it. But here the way is, like, you have illustrations and you could do it. Also, I could like share something which the organization I work with or partner with have done the similar thing in Panna National Tiger Reserve, where they have collected some stories on recipes, but then it kind of like also like talks not just about recipes, but it brings back a lot of other issues, challenges, and also like the knowledge around that wild food itself. So probably, Shannon, I can like share some links to publications afterwards, which can go on the Discord, and
Yeah.
Kunal could like find it useful.
That would be fantastic. And I think that, that this question of attribution is also another, we were just talking about language, but also attribution becomes really difficult, right? It becomes difficult and what to take, what to leave, how to acknowledge respectfully the efforts, but also retaining the integrity of the knowledge within the community. It is a very tricky, especially I think with what the work you're doing, where you're actually working with historical and cultural work, which really goes into really the traditional knowledge of the community and their own histories. So could you explain a little bit more about that? I'm actually really interested in that. Like how does that work? Because that gets into also, now we're also getting into certain like sort of national laws and protected information as well, but we have to bump up against the National Biodiversity Act and others have attempted to address. So yeah, so how do you work on that from like with your historical information?
When it comes to the climate historians that we have like working here, it's mainly the information that we're collecting is also like, as you're saying, not many a times it includes a lot of species related work, or like specificities in it. In a generalistic term, we're also like understanding how they have seen the changes in Nilgiris, and then for now we haven't like given out that information anywhere. We're kind of like just in the collating phase. But I mean, like that's the biggest challenge even for us as coming working with communities. We have like faced what to like put out and what not to put out. And many a times one thing we do is as we have something called tribal advisory council, where the elders and the selected representatives of the community, they come together and we kind of like take consultations and the kind of like a yes or no from them, like what they want out and what they don't want to be like published. So that's one way that we have followed, and it's worked. And also when the information is generalistic information, it has not been a problem anywhere, Shannon. And as I was mentioning, some other information that comes up, it's also like the whole credit goes to them, right? So that publication would be from Keystone Foundation side, but then the citations and then all of it, it goes to them. But again, the challenge that we're facing is the work that we have done with them, and if I want to like publish it in a paper, so then how to like bring in them as a contributors, right? So that's also like one of the question and the challenge that we are working on to find a way, especially in the scientific academic world, how to like bring uh, their contributions. And so otherwise publications, it's been a bit easier for us on and on, because it's vernacular language. We have added not just Tamil, we also have the Irula language, Kurumba language, Sholiga language. So it's in their language many a times, so that they can read it and they refer to it. We use it in the schools also many a times, which is from their elders, as a contribution. Yeah.
Also such a good point, right? Because when we publish, most of the time it's in English, right? If it's an academic publication, it's going to end up being in English, right? So then if you attribute it, which you should always, as you said, provide attribution as authors, right? I have papers that have 50 plus authors because it's like I basically attributed everybody who collected data because it was valuable, right? So, and that's usually not a problem. Most journals, if you explain to them, most journals are actually respectful of that. But the problem is if you're not working with an English speaking community, then it's important. I really appreciate what you're saying, that you make sure to translate it back into the language so that they can also appreciate and utilize that knowledge themselves and have that retained, because they've contributed to. I think that's really important. And I like that you're also using it in schools as well, because that also adds to, the enhancing the pride in your local knowledge and the local information and the abilities of the local community as well. That I think it's important for school children to see that knowledge is generated from within as well. It's not just coming from some textbook somewhere. I think it's fantastic you did that. That's a really important point. This is also a question for both of you, and it's I'm just trying to see if I can translate it myself. It's in English, but I'm trying to translate it. It's going back to some of the earlier conversation we were having about, mapping problems to questions and, making sure we do what the community wants and is excited about. And it's from Mendel, and Mendel wants to know about the breakdown of projects that span the range between simple contributions to fully engaged projects. So I think what the question is about how does that work when it's a really large project? How do you really work on that mapping of to the community's wants? Like, for example, Season Watch is a program that's very huge, and it's actually been going on for a long time. So how, Bhavya, do you map that? And also, Jegan, with your work, how do you map some of your larger projects to the communities in terms of engaging them so that they're really fully engaged when it's such a large project? I think if you're doing a community specific project, it's maybe a little easier to get them engaged, but some of these bigger projects where you want to compare across geographies. So it's a question to both of you. I hope I translated it correctly, and I hope you understand it as well.
I'm sorry, I couldn't get the later part. Map what exactly?
So I think if I'm understanding, and maybe I'm mistranslated, so Mendel can actually comment on this if I'm mistranslated. So I think that this mapping so that people are engaged, right? If you're doing a community-specific project where you're working with that community on a project that's relevant to them, it's fairly straightforward because you're doing what they want. But if you're doing a very large project that spans geographies, right? That individual community that may be very, very important to your research, it may be harder to get them engaged. So how do you go through the process of engagement when it's a much more established, and I'm mentioning Season Watch, and a lot of the work that you're doing with birds also, you need to do it all over the country. You can't just do it in one community. That's the question, if I understood it.
Engage in the sense, I don't understand what does it mean by engaging?
Engaging the citizens in the work. How do you get them? Yeah. Getting them involved in the citizen science.
So. Okay. I mean, already people who are involved in it, and how do I go back and kind of engage with them, or is it something new people which I have to engage with? Is it like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think the question is a more broad question. It's like,
okay.
As I said, if it's a project specific to that community, it's probably a much easier task to get them involved. If it's a project that is a huge project already established with already established methods, right? Getting the community participants and the community engagement is much harder. So I think he's asking, how does that work?
Yeah, got it. Yeah, so it's difficult for each and everyone to engage, but maybe if one example is like, for instance, when the SOIB, the State of Indian Birds, happened, the second one happened, and I think they sent the certificates to each and every participants who contributed to their data. So I think that's one way of a nice example of how they engaged. Whether it is just one checklist or whether people did 1,000 checklists, they sent a certificate to them. It's just a PDF to their email address, which is one way of engaging them, which is a nice thing to do. So that one way of engaging, example of engaging. And the other way I can think of is that if it is a statewide, it is difficult. Nationwide, you can just do it like a how do you call that? Passively, you can just reach them out. You don't have to call them up and say thank you or anything. But like, for instance, the Pongal bird count, we kind of meet every year, once in a year, and whoever comes and they take responsibility for the in their own districts and reach people out. So there are various level of volunteerism involved in that. one person will be engaging with state coordinators, and the state coordinators will be engaging with the other people who are close to them. So that way they are kind of engaging to contribute and encourage them to contribute. So that's one way of engaging them. And once the project, and it's just a one-off example. For example, it's just a 1 year happening, 2-3 days it happens. But what if it is a 3-year project? And what will you do after that? You just leave them, say tata bye bye to them. Okay, you did, and we are done. No, that's not the way to do it. So some people whom I know, they engage with them even after finishing the project. For example, once the project is over, they still continue to engage with them online or capacity building. That's one way of engaging. Conduct some Zoom calls or take them for a bird walk or reach them out with other citizen science platforms like, see, there is a naturalist is there, don't just look at birds, look at other things, and look at the other citizens projects in India. So that's one way of engaging them. And so basically why there are two ways. One, the practitioner they're focused about their data. Okay, I'm going to get this, and after that, okay, I'm done with it. I'll publish a report and say thank to everyone. That's one way of doing it. Some people, there's nothing wrong in that. The other way is why do we do citizen science? We want people to be engaged with nature. And we anticipate that they will also become a good citizen scientist, and they will also protect nature and things like that. So there we have to have a continuous engagement. So that's very important. It's not just even if it is one-off. I think the practitioner should think about how to engage in a long term rather than just focused on just one off projects. I hope I answered the question. Sorry.
We are out of time, but if I wanted to give you a chance to say something. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's already 2:02. So, in short, if I have to tell, I understand Mendel's question, what has meaning in there. And I know if Geeta is here on the Discord, so we actually engaged with them for the season watch thing, right? Because it's a big data set that we are talking about the whole India, and even we have eBird kind of, it's for the world. So one thing to include more, I mean, to bring in more inclusivity is to tie up with the local NGOs that's been in there for a longer time. And then it's also the poll in itself, the poll that we created for this whole session says that there is lack of knowledge. So that's the first barrier that has to be huddled through, because we don't know what apps are there and why it is meant to. So probably tying up with the local NGOs, schools, and then kind of popularizing and communicating about one's app is the first way. And second thing is how can we make the app in itself, if you're using the app digital space, how do we make it more easy with the user interface? So I feel that is main thing. Even for me, sometimes when there are so many questions, I don't want to spend my time in entering all those details. So probably the user interface, making it much more easier, a pictorial, that might help. So these are two things which I want to respond to that question.
I wish we had more time. I so enjoyed this conversation with both of you. I learned a lot from you. I also appreciate the questions that we received. They were very insightful questions. This is exactly what this conference is about. Thank you for taking the time. Also being very open about the struggles that you both personally have had with the work that you're doing. And also, I just want to thank you for doing it and just for being just really, really wonderful, wonderful champions for citizen science and also for increasing the love of nature in this country. So I say that from my heart, because I really appreciate that for both of you. Thank you so much for joining us. So I think at this point we should call everyone back in to just say farewell to the conference and give the last votes of thanks.
Yes, I think we're all here, Shannon. The committee is here.
Okay, please turn on your videos. Yeah, good. You're all there. Hi. So Jane and Bhavya, you can stay online or you can, whatever you feel comfortable with. We're just going to say.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
So much to both of you. Okay. So over to you, Akshata.
Yes, so thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And we have everybody here in the committee. I think Geeta is not here. So thank you so much. And I think Digangana is also missing. So yeah, like every year, we do this for all of you, for our audience who've been so cooperative, so curious, so cordial all the time, so engaging, so insightful, and always just the best. So thank you so much, everybody. We're doing this for you each year, and hope it's you enjoy it as much as we do putting this together for you. So thank you, and we hope to be back next year also, same place, hopefully around the same time. So thank you once again, and over to the organizing committee. And I'll also quickly like to, take this opportunity to thank Amit and Tamzan here, who are here to so effortlessly every year they put this thing together to bring this conference to you, and also Digangna for helping us with all the communications work so far. Thank you so much. I think I've just thanked everybody else, so yeah.
I'll just start. I'll just say again, thank you to everyone who's participated. As I said at the beginning, this is my favorite conference. I love being part of it every year. It's such a huge learning experience for me. I'm not a super experienced citizen science, either a practitioner or an organizer in that way. I have done it, and I continue to be very interested in driving it forward. So I'm very much learning every year from everyone. So thank you to all my co-organizers, especially also Geeta and Anita for their help this year in particular, and of course to you, Akshata, as well.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you. I'll be sharing the feedback form very shortly on the Lounge and Announcements channel. So please let us know what you thought of this conference, if we can improve in any way, and also what would you like to hear for next year, if there are any particular themes, ideas that you'd want us to come up with. Please feel free to share them in the feedback form. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for all your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.